So what we do is we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs in companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use.
I'm sure you can imagine hundreds of films are shot in Paris each and every year. International box office hits such as Inception, Midnight in Paris, and Ronin all have the mandatory shots of iconic landmarks and all have scenes of the city's ubiquitous underground system, the Metro.
A scene from the upcoming French movie Les Jours Venus. It's one of around 60 productions a year that film in the Paris Metro.
Le métro fait partie du fonctionnement des Parisiens. Donc, y a pas
the metro is part of the Parisian way of life. There isn't a specific famous shot of one metro station. It's just a natural means of transport. A Parisian who doesn't take the metro is a weird exception.
est un individu bizarre, quoi, pour moi.
A permit to shoot here on Line 3 for the day has cost the production €4,000. On a line that isn't too busy like this one, cameras and crew are allowed to shoot in the carriages.
We can ask for anything. They can then discuss it. The overground metro, taking over a station, filming in a studio. Anything is possible. You just have to submit your request.
For larger productions or to recreate a specific era, the Phantom Station at Porte des Lilas can be hired out and entirely redecorated. But this doesn't come cheap. A day here will cost filmmakers €15,000.
The Metro has always been present in films and throughout the history of cinema. If you want to show the history of Parisian transport and the city of Paris, then you film the Metro and tell your story through the Metro.
As well as being a great advert for the French capital, filming requests are also a nice earner for the city's transport operator, netting them up to €200,000 a year.
In business today, 3 things to know. First, Russia tightens its grip on the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea. What makes Ukraine so economically important and why you should care. Then, the escalating crisis chokes the world markets. The Russian ruble tanks and equities get pummeled. And the day after the Oscars, we look at the business of being black in Hollywood. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. A very busy business day. Markets around the world tumbled amid anxiety that Russia is preparing to launch an invasion of Ukraine to take control of Crimea, the economically and politically sensitive peninsula. The escalating tensions roiled both Russian and global markets. At one point, the Russian ruble tumbled to a new low against the dollar. The Russian central bank aggressively hiked interest rates to 7% to defend the currency. The Russian stock market fell 12%. Germany's DAX down 3%, France's CAC 40 down 2%, and London's FTSE 100 off 1.5%. The U.S. Dow also fell triple digits. We'll wrap up our markets in a moment, but first we begin coverage of the Ukrainian fallout with Ivan Eland. Ivan Eland is the senior fellow at the Independent Institute, a frequent guest here on Arise. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us, Ivan.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about why Ukraine is really so economically important to Russia and what a large part about this, I take it, is about. Ukraine basically is a conduit for a good portion of what Russia sells.
Yes, Russia has a lot of energy exports, oil and natural gas, and the pipelines go through Ukraine to Western Europe, where the high-value, high-money customers are. So that gives Russia some leverage over Ukraine, but of course, in the past, Ukraine has had a bit of leverage over Russia since these pipelines go through their territory. There's also a lot of trade between the two countries. Russia is Ukraine's largest trading partner, and there's a lot of so there's an interconnected web of commerce that goes between the two countries too. I mean, Ukraine has been either in the Soviet Union or in the Russian orbit for many years, and in fact, the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea has operated there for centuries.
And it's important to note that the Soviet Union gave Crimea to the Ukraine back then, it probably seemed like an okay idea. As one commentator said, they're all part of the unhappy Soviet Union back then.
Right, and Khrushchev did that in 1954. But of course, the Black Sea, that port down there in the Black Sea in Crimea, is very strategic for the Russians because they have few ports that are that far south, and so it's very vital, and that's really what Putin wants here.
Let me ask you something. So Russia, from what I understand, exports about half of its natural gas through these pipelines through Ukraine and sells about half of everything it exports now to European Union countries. So when you say that Russia has some power over the Ukraine and vice versa, the EU here may have some significant economic power over Russia.
Yeah, but the problem when we do economic sanctions is unlike military action, which is a zero-sum game, economic and financial transactions, both parties benefit from them. So both parties are hurt when they're cut off. We always say, well, we're going to put economic sanctions on this country or that country, but it also hurts the sanctioning countries. And so it would hurt the EU if they reduce their energy imports from Russia because energy prices would spike in Europe. And of course, Europe is not in the soundest financial health either after the EU financial crisis.
Well, that's why there's a real significant risk here to the economy. I mean, Europe is still struggling to come out of a recession. What about the grain that Ukraine ships? That is a major export for Ukraine, and I imagine there is a risk of a disruption of supplies.
Yeah, Ukraine was always the breadbasket for the Soviet Union, and that's why it was so important. Also, there's some heavy industry in the east of Ukraine that is important as well. But yes, certainly the agricultural exports could be bans on imports from Russia to put pressure on the Ukraine. It would be harder for the Ukraine to ban exports because the Ukrainian exports the economy is in such bad shape. They're headed toward financial disaster. They need all the money they can get. So I think it would be Russia pressuring Ukraine
I want to ask you
rather than vice versa.
One last question here. This is not the old Soviet Union. There is a significant capitalist movement, obviously, in Russia. And I'm wondering if you understand if there's any business pressure on Putin to pull back a little bit within Russia.
Well, I think, anytime you have international business people, and Russia does have international business people, it acts commerce and financial interaction between countries. It's no guarantee that there's not going to be a war. We had a war when there was heavy amounts of interdependence before World War I, but I do think it is the break on war because you have a peace lobby in both countries, and I think anytime there's international businessmen in any country, this case Russia, it does help the situation.
Okay, Ivan Elin from the Independent Institute, thank you.
Thank you.
Concerns grow over economic sanctions as the crisis escalates in the Ukraine. Today, the White House said it is highly likely to impose economic and political sanctions on Russia unless it sends its troops in the Crimea region back to Russian bases. Arise Washington correspondent Leila McDowell joins us now from D.C. Good afternoon, Leila.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
So John Kerry was pretty strong this weekend in saying that sanctions are on the way and they'll even revisit the G8 summit, which is supposed to take place in Russia. What are you hearing today?
Well, that's exactly right. The Obama administration is scrambling to find effective measures to tighten the economic noose around Putin's neck. And that's including kicking Russia out of the G8, which is due to meet in Sochi in June. The State Department today said, as you mentioned, Andrew, that it's highly likely it will impose additional economic and political sanctions on Russia unless it sends its troops in the Crimea region back to Russian bases and engages in dialogue with the interim Ukraine government in Kiev. As you know, Secretary of State John Kerry travels to Ukraine tomorrow, and he's outlined a series of steps, including asset freezes of Russian government officials and business leaders, visa bans, and other measures designed to disrupt trade. U.S. lawmakers have joined the movement as well and are considering options such as imposing sanctions on Russia's banks, freezing assets of Russian public institutions and private investors. U.S. Senator Chris Murphy today announced that. He's the chairman of the Senate's Europe subcommittee. Now, the administration has already taken some smaller steps, canceling a number of meetings and planned joint naval military exercises, essentially putting the brakes on all aspects of bilateral relations until the crisis is further resolved.
She as well. But let me ask you something. How nervous is the White House over this because of what happened in Syria and some talk, unusual talk, from Republicans in Congress at a time during crisis that the administration isn't going to back up its words.
That's exactly right. The Obama administration right now is getting a lot of criticism from Republicans. Senator John McCain today called his foreign policy feckless. It's a word he's used before to describe it. And Republicans are saying that it is a weak foreign policy and that, in fact, invites aggression. They want to see tough action against Russia, but they haven't outlined any details. And of course, military option is off the table. Republicans say that as well.
Are you hearing that the United States then will act unilaterally when it comes to sanctions?
They may act unilaterally when it comes to sanctions. Obama is under a lot of pressure to do something, but the reality is they know that sanctions by the United States alone are not going to be effective. And right now they are also frantically making calls to leaders around the world, particularly in Europe and also Canada, to try to make sure that there is some coordinated action against Russia in order to have maximum impact.
Okay, Leila McDowell from Washington, D.C., our Rise News correspondent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Coming up, we'll look at how the U.S. markets are taking Ukrainian news with Jeff DeMasso. You're watching Rise Exchange. Because we live in a global, interconnected world, business news no longer stops when the markets close on Wall Street. And what we've discovered over the past few years of the financial crisis is that events and news that happen even in the smallest countries impact the United States and the world at large. As we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs and companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use.
Arise News is a different kind of network. We are able to tell our own stories, and we're able to cover stories in a way that other media outlets don't do. We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. Arise News is a place where we can tell stories in an interesting, factual, inclusive way like no one else in the business can.
The standoff in the Ukraine slammed U.S. equities. Let's take a complete look at how they finished. The Dow Jones Industrial Average losing 153.68. That's well off its lows of the day to 16,168, the worst performance in a month. The S&P 500 down 13.72 to 18.45, and the Nasdaq off 30.82 to 42.77. Taking a look at some stocks we're watching today. Men's Warehouse and Joseph A. Bank finally moved a step closer to inking a deal after 2 months of back and forth discussions. Joseph A. Bank had rejected the most recent offer of $63.50 a share from Men's Warehouse, but said it would be open to a higher bid. Men's Warehouse closing up 31 cents to 54.10. Tyco International sealed a deal with private equity firm Carlyle Group today to sell its South Korean fire and security business for just under $2 billion in cash. The company also announced today it is authorizing a new $2 billion stock buyback program. Tyco up nearly 2% to 43.02. And PNC Financial Services Group says it received federal subpoenas about its lending practices in relation to certain federally backed mortgage loans. The 2 subpoenas from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York involve loans insured or guaranteed by the Federal Housing Administration. PNC closing down 80 cents to 80.98. Taking a look at commodities, gold on quite a run, up 29.60 to 1351.20. That is something we saw throughout the world today. Oil also up better than $2 to 104.60, no doubt because of the Ukrainian situation. So what could be in store for the markets over the next few days? Jeff DeMasso from Advisor Investments is back here on Arise Exchange. Welcome back, Jeff.
Great, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let me ask you something. Last week we had an analyst on who said, U.S. stocks are probably not going to react all that much to Ukraine. Yep. Then today happened. So what is changing?
You know, I think it's just the classic fear trade. You know, the concern here is that this situation in Ukraine really spirals into something more, a bigger conflict between Europe and the U.S. and Russia. And so it's really that classic fear trade. People sell first, ask questions later. Mm-hmm. So you're going to sell your stocks, your risk assets, and you're going to go to your safe havens.
What are the safe havens right now in a time where everything is so up in the air? I mean, gold is not that much of a safe haven because if they solve this thing and the currencies come back, gold will go down.
You know, in theory, it would, but you know, right now we saw people go to it, so they still see gold as that safe haven in that classic fear trade, store of value, go to gold. We also saw the U.S. Treasury do well today. So it's nice actually to see that the U.S. dollar, U.S. Treasury's most liquid market, still that safe haven despite concerns about the value or where interest rates or yields might be headed. In that classic fear trade, it's still a safe haven, was still a desirable place to be.
And so right now, the markets are purely reacting to news, and this is the big overhang over the markets, right? There's really not a whole lot that's going to be driving this market over the next few days, you think?
We actually saw some pretty good fundamental data today out of the U.S., and I think that actually helped stabilize the market in the U.S. here. The S&P closed right around where it opened. The 10-year bond yields fell down to about 2.6, but they really kind of could have come down more given the fear and the reaction we saw initially.
Consumer spending increased the greatest amount in about 12 years in the service sector. That was a little bit of a surprise, would you say, considering all of the weather going on?
Yeah, given the weather, I'm surprised it was that strong. That we have a strong consumer doesn't surprise me too much. We've seen balance sheets improve over the past couple of years. Incomes are growing. Unemployment, we'd like to see more high-quality jobs come out, but it's slowly improving in the employment situation, so strong consumer there.
Warren Buffett had said earlier today if there's a big sell-off in the markets, he would be buying. That's, I mean, he could kind of afford to do that. What are you advising clients right now? Because they are no doubt going to pick up the phone and say, what should I do? Is the world coming to an end?
Well, we don't think the world's coming to an end. We preach a lot of the same that Warren Buffett does of spending time in the market. His quarterly letter just came out, and really his message was, get invested when you can, and then don't panic. Don't, listen to the headlines. Don't listen to Mr. Market yelling out, crazy prices to you. Just stay invested for the long term. Focus on your long-term goals, and that's the message we try and keep. And
you can't catch a falling knife. So if you are not a trader, you should just kind of ignore this news of today and the little hiccups.
We think so. We often tell our clients to actually turn off the news if they can and turn off the headlines a little bit. It's really focusing on that long term. Where the market goes today or tomorrow, it doesn't really impact where you're going to be able to retire 10, 15 years down the road. It's really taking that long term.
So over the next quarter or so, let's say we get out of this Ukrainian situation, so what are the sectors that you're sort of liking?
We like healthcare. It's a sector that we've liked structurally for a long time. We like the demographics behind it, both in the U.S. and in emerging markets and globally. We like technology. I think the valuations are reasonably attractive there. And, you can make a call for oil. And energy doing pretty well given some of this concern we've seen in Ukraine.
Okay. Jeff DeMasso, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for your analysis on the market on a very tricky day.
Thanks.
Time now for a look at our business ticker. A new round in the battle between billionaire investor Carl Icahn and eBay. In a letter posted today to shareholders, Icahn accused board member Mark Andreessen for mishandling the purchase and sale of Skype, saying his conflicts are, quote, clear and insurmountable. eBay purchased the video chat service in 2005 and sold a controlling stake in the company in 2009 to an investor group that included Andreessen's venture capital firm. eBay board members and Icahn have been going back and forth tit for tat after Carl Icahn has accused board members of failing to have the company's best interests at heart and costing shareholders lots of money over bad deals. eBay is denying all the accusations. It's going to cost a little bit more to ship a package using FedEx's freight services at the end of this month. The company says shipping rates for its freight business will rise by 3.9% effective March 31st. The increase includes shipments within the U.S., Hawaii, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Canada, and Mexico, and comes after FedEx increased shipping rates by the same rate for its domestic express business on January 6. Citibank could be back in trouble. It has been subpoenaed by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts over alleged money laundering concerns. The grand jury probe comes after Citibank cut its 2013 profits by $235 million on Friday after revealing fraud at Banamex. That is a Mexican subsidiary. Apple says it will unveil its new hands-free iPhone voice control for drivers at the Geneva Motor Show this week. Apple's CarPlay technology allows drivers to control their iPhones by touch and by voice. It also enables drivers to get access to their contacts stored on the iPhone, make calls, return missed calls, or listen to voicemails without taking their hands off the steering wheel. That's important. Apple says CarPlay will be available in cars from more than a dozen manufacturers. Well, chilly weather stalled auto sales in February, continuing a weak start to 2014. Automotive expert and Entertainment Radio Network CEO Alan Taylor joins us now from Oregon for a rundown of how they did. Alan, welcome back to Arise Exchange.
Thank you.
All right, so give us the overview here. Not much of a surprise because everybody says Americans simply didn't go shopping, and bad weather, they don't like going to the showrooms.
It's colder than hell out there. I just was on the phone with a friend of mine in Detroit, and he said it's been the coldest year he's had that he can even remember. He said it's freezing outside.
And I don't really think about it this way, but I guess if I'm in the car market, I don't get enthusiastic about going around and driving in snow and slush and ice and test driving cars, if people still test drive cars.
Yeah, sales fell 3.1% to just over 1 million vehicles in the month of January, according to auto data. And I can understand why, just like you just said. I mean, I don't want to go out either. There's a lot of other ways of shopping for cars on the internet and the rest, and then go out when it warms up a little bit.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Everybody is using the weather as an excuse. And retailers have done it for years when there's bad weather, and there's certainly something to it. Even the Fed chair, Janet Yellen, said last week, that there's probably something to the weather. But are we sure that's why we're seeing a very difficult start to 2014 for the auto manufacturers?
You know, that's really a good question, and I guess only time will tell. But I have a very strong feeling that you're going to see a strong year. The best year was 2007, 16.2 million sold. Last year we hit 15.6. I think we're going to beat that in 2014. I think we're just getting a little slow start. Mother Nature has definitely got something to do with it, because a lot of great product and a lot of people anxious to buy new, great deals to be had, good interest rates, and zero a lot of times, lots of incentives. You may even see some incentive wars.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're shareholders of these companies, then you're hoping for very good comps from the second quarter to the first quarter. Let me ask you a little bit about the Costco Auto Program. Costco, you have to buy things in bulk, like, 20 rolls of toilet paper at a time. Are you going to have to buy like a dozen cars at once through Costco?
No, believe it or not, this year Costco Auto Program is expected to sell 375,000 new vehicles, and there is more than 3,000 different dealerships involved in the Costco Auto Program. If you go online to their website and just put your zip code in, it'll tell you which Costco has these programs. But you can definitely save money, up to 15% on the price of a car, and also when it comes to sales and service and accessories, 15% off there too. I have friends that have bought cars there. It's easier. People don't want to go in and get, chewed on by a salesman, and they know what they want.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. We're looking at video of Costco, and we're seeing all the sweaters stacked up. The cars aren't actually going to be in Costco, right? They're still working with the franchisees?
They are definitely working with the franchisees. They have to. That's the way the system is set up.
And so why the 15% discount? What exactly is driving the efficiencies there that the dealers can cut their prices by 15%?
Well, actually, I want to make sure I correct that. It's 15% on parts and service. They say that they'll save at least $1,000 when they buy a car through Costco. But I think it is the convenience of you go in. We are so much more educated buyers today because of the internet. I know what I want. I know what color. I know what equipment. I just want to get it bought.
Well, that's why I have to ask if whether the franchise model at some point, and I know it's the law in most states, is going to go away, and why you can't just buy cars direct. I'm wondering if the automakers are at some point going to push for that.
Well, you know what? That's a darn good question, and I think that companies like Costco are the ones that are going to cause that to happen, if it does.
All right, Alan Taylor, thank you so much, automotive expert and Entertainment Radio Network CEO. Appreciate your thoughts today.
Pleasure, anytime.
Ahead, stealing from the Girl Scouts will make you our favorite person of the day. That's next here on the Rise Exchange.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
The great thing about Arise Entertainment 360 is that we cover the 360 of entertainment, food, fashion, lifestyle, culture. We're able to cover it all. And the thing I love most about the show is we're able to do a stunning combination of high and low. So we can talk about Rihanna on the red carpet, but we can also speak about high art with people like Sanford Biggers and Hank Willis. We actually spend quality time with our guests, and we really get to know them. It's really intriguing because we get a 360 look at our guests.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, that person is David Betancourt, who doesn't quite understand the meaning behind Girl Scout cookies, as in, you're not supposed to steal from the girls who sell them. Now, love them or hate them, Girl Scout cookies are as American as apple pie. But Betancourt thought it was okay to swipe $45 in cash from a donation jar belonging to the Scouts who were selling the cookies. According to the NBC station in San Diego, California, 2 Scouts, Zoe and Grace Fullerton, were selling cookies outside a grocery store. Police say Betancourt ran from the store and then grabbed the money from the Girl Scouts tip jar. The girls were raising money to send cookies to our troops overseas. Betancourt jumped into a getaway car. There was actually a getaway car for stealing money from Girl Scouts. But the Scouts remembered the license plate of the car, called cops, and they arrested Betancourt. Betancourt had outstanding warrants for his arrest, so now he's locked up for stealing $45. So, for stealing money from Girl Scouts, David Betancourt is our favorite person of the day. Next, African-American filmmakers ran away with the Oscars, so how is the business of being black in Hollywood going? You're watching Arise Exchange.
Arise serves underserved communities by bringing them news, information, sports, and entertainment from places that are becoming part of the world economy, that are becoming a part of the world voice, and decisions that are affecting things in the world that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about safety and security. And if you come to Arise and you watch our broadcast, these are the things we're going to bring to you every day, 24 hours a day.
One of the great things about Arise Entertainment 360 is we have this Arise to Your Health segment, which really focuses on the holistic approach of being healthy. So we do everything from working out to juicing to getting in shape by doing fun exercises like bouncing on a trampoline or wearing these bouncy boots on our feet when we're jumping all over the set. We've done karate, we've danced the weight off, we've done just about everything. And of course, I love when we eat on set, but we do it in a very healthy and clean way.
The world is still buzzing after Hollywood's biggest night after the movie 12 Years a Slave made history at the Oscars. The gripping film took home 3 major awards: Best Supporting Actress, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Picture. Director Steve McQueen became the first black man to win an Academy Award for Best Picture in the 86 years since the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Sciences started handing out the Oscars. It's been an uphill battle for black actors and black films in Hollywood, insiders say, and last night's win was a very long time coming. Casting director and chief managing partner of Winsome Sinclair and Associates, Winsome Sinclair has casted some of the biggest stars for films in Hollywood for more than 2 decades, and she joins us now by phone. Winsome, thank you for joining us and giving us your thoughts today.
Thank you for having me.
Let me ask you something. Hattie McDaniel won for Best Supporting Actress for Gone with the Wind, of course, in 1939. That was a long time ago. She gave a rousing speech in front of a segregated audience. Let me ask you, how far have we come since it took till 2014 for an African-American to win Best Director?
Wow. We've definitely come a long way, and I agree with the opening segment. It was definitely a long time coming. You know, we've had African-American directors in the past who definitely, you know, have been nominated. I know John Singleton was the youngest ever nominated. But Steve McQueen's win last night, I feel like he's opened a door that can't be closed anymore.
And so, you know, were you surprised at how much and how well 12 Years a Slave did? This was what they would consider somewhat of an art house movie. It was one of the few this year that did very well, that was in the Oscar-nominated categories.
Absolutely not surprised. I mean, the work was phenomenal. I mean, they so deserved every accolade that they achieved. I wasn't surprised. I was pleased, though, that they did get what they deserved.
You work with, obviously, in the industry, and you cast individuals. Is there still sort of this desire to cast African Americans in African American roles, and whites in white roles, and Latinos in Latino roles?
Well, you know, I think that unfortunately, that is still the case at this point. Do I see a change coming? I feel like that's definitely in our future. But, you know, there was a time, you know, when they were casting white people in African American roles. So I think we've come a long way.
Well, and this is a problem throughout corporate America, which is basically your executives in this industry, from what I understand, are still largely white men.
Absolutely, and we still don't have as much green-lighting power as we could or should.
And so, Winsome, what will change that? From an investment standpoint, what will empower African Americans by basically putting them at the head of studios, whether it's independent studios or major studios? How do you get to that point?
I do believe it'll start with being from independent studios, because I think we're in the era of the independent filmmaker. So once we sort of realize that we have that power, we can do it, and we come together in the way that we should, I believe that then because I think we have to do it first, and then Hollywood will invite us in.
Well, let me ask you, do you think that there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on in Hollywood? It is a very liberal area. The actors speak out on liberal causes, but sometimes in their own internal business relationships, you could see that they don't act that way.
Yeah, it hasn't sort of permeated to the level that it should. There's definitely one face put forward and then something else going on behind closed doors. But once again, I still see the gap within that, getting smaller and smaller.
And let me ask you something in about the 40 seconds we have left. What about the pay gap? Are African-American actors paid like they should compared to their white counterparts?
No, because you look at a film like Best Man Holiday, which did extremely well compared to what they paid for it, and all those actors, after The Best Man had been a huge hit, came back and had to do that movie for scale.
Okay,
And they wouldn't have asked that of any, I don't believe they would have asked that of any other ethnicity, especially Caucasian ethnicity, to say, come back and do a sequel for something that did really well and do it for scale.
Okay, Winsome Sinclair, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Finally, like many of you, I am a small business owner myself. Along with a group of terrific partners, we launched a small airline, Hopscotch Air, on Long Island, New York, 5 years ago. This weekend, we celebrated the company's 5th birthday, a testament to the pilots, mechanics, and team that made it possible. The company now has hubs on Long Island, Westchester, Boston, and Stowe, Vermont. I am very proud of all the work this group has done. There's an additional Arise News connection, by the way. Our own Julian Phillips, creator of the original Soundbite restaurant, catered the event, making his famous Southern mac and cheese and Cajun wings. So good food and great-looking airplanes. Thanks, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. See you tomorrow. In business today, 3 things to know. First, Russia tightens its grip on the Ukrainian peninsula